So it's a great honor and a privilege to have been invited to speak with you all today as part of this amazing festival celebrating 3D design. And I am a 3D designer. That is my professional training. And I just wanted to kind of share with you all a little bit about my journey, how I started my career at Mondelez and how it's since evolved, as Daniela mentioned. But for those of you who don't know, Mondelez International is a global snacking company. So we operate in around 150 countries globally, home to some of our iconic brands, as some of them Daniela mentioned, Cadbury Milk, Oreo, Toblerone, to name a few. We make biscuits, chocolate. So chocolate is something that I do on a day-to-day basis, but we also create other confectionery such as gum, candy, powdered beverages across global markets, so across many regions, many countries. At Mondelez International, it's our mission to really lead the future of snacking around the world, offering our consumers the right snack in the right moment and crucially in the right way. This means that we create for our consumers experiences that are going to offer them moments of joy. And that kind of feel-good memory that you get from eating a chocolate bar, like your favorite snack, that is ultimately our ambition. And absolutely, I agree, chocolate is always the right snack. So I started my journey at Mondelez International in 2014 as a graduate, having just completed my degree in product design at Birmingham City University. So I am based in the UK, and I did my degree at Birmingham and ended up working in Bourneville, which is just outside of Birmingham, so in the West Midlands in the UK. And today I wanted to talk to you all on three core areas. So firstly, describing how we utilize 3D workflows in the design of our multidisciplinary teams in Mondelez, who are really starting to embrace it as a way of innovating and creative thinking. And then finally, I will move on to talking about how my design career has kind of evolved into digital innovation. And this is where, alluding to the fact that we are constantly surrounded at the moment by emerging technology. It's now the present, no longer the future. And I kind of wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot into my career, the skills I've learned along the way, and that have really helped to shape my current role as a digital innovation manager. So firstly, to kick things off, let's talk about designing chocolate. So as I mentioned, I designed the global design team, which is based in Bourneville, home of Cadbury. Started my career as a 3D designer, so designing chocolate bars for brands such as Cadbury Milk, and some of these amazing brands that you'll see on the screen. So not only designing for kind of European markets, but global markets. The global design team is part of our research and development function. So our role is primarily to create consumer experiences for our chocolate category. I've had the opportunity to work for our brands on a global level, designing chocolate products for around the world, which is a really great experience. You get to understand and connect with consumers from all walks of life, and you get to eat what you make, which is really rare as a designer. You don't often get to do that. Our day-to-day in the design team, in the global design team, is to work through the creative briefs that we get in, usually aligned to our marketing function. And we would be delivering against a very specific consumer need and looking at how we can grow our everyday portfolio and brand. So that normally means that we would start off by utilizing some 3D tools. So as most design teams, we would create ideas for created a starting kind of pen and paper. That's the traditional method that we would use. That might take form in ideation sessions, workshops, and then we would move into kind of our 3D workflow to create CAD, either in SolidWorks or Rhino, of the kind of selected design concepts. So these concepts then we would initially present across multidisciplinary teams for review and approval, and the screened number of concepts would be 3D printed. So we have an in-house workshop facility that facilitates the creation of mock-ups and prototypes, which are then used to be presented to our project teams to make a final decision on the final design that would be produced and then taken to trial at scale in one of our manufacturing locations. And as designers, we need to keep up with emerging tech, which is really important, and something that I'm starting to learn. The evolving tools that we have all around us. So earlier this year, we started to integrate, design Gravity Sketch into our kind of design process to optimize our 3D workflow. So we looked at how we can start designing and making a shift to designing in VR, experimenting with how we can move into kind of 3D ideation quicker, and designing in VR was really a great enabler for this. And one of the biggest advantages of kind of integrating Gravity Sketch into our creative process was that it really fostered a culture of remote collaboration. The design team in Bourneville is a global team. So we've got members based in the UK, but we've also got members overseas. And honestly, one of the challenges that we would previously have faced when running kind of creative workshops or ideation sessions was the lack of engagement and interactivity, that you just can't get that same dynamic, that same level of kind of dynamic collaboration from a creative session. So when hosting it in kind of like a conventional online meeting style, you just don't get that unless you do it kind of face to face. But by putting on a headset and get everybody together into this kind of same virtual space has really enabled us to unlock further that creative potential. So giving us the space in the metaverse to be fully immersed, bounce ideas back and forth, irrespective of our geographical locations, which has been really game-changing for us in terms of the way that we interact with Gravity Sketch as a tool. So it really means that you can be, truly immersed in your creative flow and your process. You can collaborate with your peers without that distraction, without the distraction of what's going on in the background on your phone. You've got that heightened level of engagement, of being grounded in the present moment, which means that you can ideate often quicker and then have more meaningful and impactful collaboration with your team, which is one of the benefits that we experienced when we started to interact and utilize Gravity Sketch. And as designers and problem solvers, it's important for us to be grounded in the present, right? To be able to see things for what they are, to better understand the problem that you're trying to solve, or the experience in our case that we're trying to create. And this nicely brings me on to our next topic that I want to talk to you about, which is how design thinking as a process for problem solving is used across teams in our organization, and how crucially it's continually being seen as value added. I want to start by channeling IDEO's notion. You don't have to be a designer or a creative to use the design thinking as a process. There's many teams in our organization that are starting to embrace this as a way to help them to put consumers first, put them at the heart and the center of the problem to create those moments of joy that we endeavour to create for our consumers globally. So design thinking as a process, it helps us to be better creatives, problem solvers, innovators, to ground us in putting the user first and foremost, whether it's to solve an internal problem, whether the user is one of our colleagues, or whether it's looking to create a chocolate experience for our consumers, like many of you. It helps us to build deep empathy. So, starting with the first phase of the process, equipping us with the tools that we need to put on the shoes of our consumers to create those experiences, the right experience for our consumers. And this is particularly important, I found, as a designer in a global team where I was often designing for markets that were not familiar to me. So with the support of my team, we would often run immersion activities, workshops to build that deep understanding of our consumers. And by doing so, I've had the opportunity to, work with some fantastic markets. We've launched products in Australia and North America, and we to build that deep level of empathy, we've conducted extensive interviews and done kind of consumer research to understand the need that we're trying to meet before we propose the solution. Excuse me. So to do that, by doing that, it means that we are able to better solve problems, and we can start to look at what the problem is, as opposed to moving to solution mode. So during my time within R&D, surrounded by some brilliant technical minds, and often the natural inclination is to pivot to solution mode. And we started to kind of change the culture of thinking at this point to really empower people, some of our colleagues, to think about the problem first and do a bit of a root cause analysis before jumping into the solution mode. You'll have to excuse me. I do have a bit of a cough. That's why I've had to flick my video off momentarily, but hopefully it won't distract me from the rest of my talk with you folks. But when we talk about solving problems, it's instinctive and natural for us as humans to want to go to the root cause of the problem, but to solve the problem immediately. And by implementing design thinking, what we really are hoping to do within our organization is to change that culture of thinking, to empower people to think about the problem first before jumping to the solution. It's not always easy to do, and we're often faced with challenges along the way to keep the project team grounded. But when we have found that when you start to do this, it helps you to create better experiences for your consumers, which is ultimately, the ambition that we're striving for. And this brings me on to my final topic that I wanted to share a little bit about in terms of how my career has progressed and the experiences, and most crucially, the skills that I have learned along the way to kind of help me grow and evolve. I've spent 9 years in the global design team, and I started to see the world of emerging technology rapidly evolving. Gravity Sketch is a great example of whereby even the tools that we were trained in are starting to evolve. The simple kind of pen and paper, they're advancing in amazingly inspiring ways and moving 3D sketching into VR to revolutionize the way that we interact and ideate as designers has been phenomenal, and it keeps on advancing at a rapid pace. Using VR platforms to ideate, conduct training, run dynamic meetings in the metaverse with your colleagues from around the world with their avatars, and feeling their sense of presence in the virtual space has been, it's mind-blowing in terms of how emerging technology is helping shape the way that we work. The way that we work is evolving at this rapid pace. Gen AI and low-code automation is now integral to the way that we work and enabling us to work smarter. And it's now the present as opposed to the thing of the future for many of us. And we see this taking shape in our organization and in many organizations, in many industries. And this realization prompted me to think that I needed to evolve myself as a creative problem solver and design thinker. I wanted to learn more about these technologies such as Gen AI and extended reality, low code, no code, and how these technologies are not only becoming integral to how we work smarter in the industry, but also how they can help me become a digitally smarter problem solver. And that really prompted my career move into the digital innovation team at Mondelez in September of this year, and how I now have this new role as a digital innovation manager. And I learned that I'm continuing to learn. There's some core skills that I learned during my time as an industrial designer in the design team that really laid the foundations for my new role. Looking at, just to name a few of these that you can see, understanding and being an effective communicator, problem solving, creative thinker, and understanding how to manage your stakeholders and work in multidisciplinary teams were core skills, transferable skills that have really enabled me to move into this position and problem solve, but using emerging tech now as a digital innovation manager. And for me, I'm on this incredible learning journey in my new role. It's one that I'm enjoying, and I would empower any fellow creative considering or thinking about career progression within the creative industry to really consider, think about how to grow your creative toolkit beyond the tradition, beyond the convention, embracing emerging technologies as your toolkit, as it's already the present. And by doing so, it can help shape your future and your career in the design industry. And with that, I'd like to take the time to say thanks to everybody. Apologies for the technical glitches along the way and my troublesome cough, but I hope you've enjoyed the content that I've shared with you, and it's been a great opportunity to speak with you all. A true pleasure. So thank you very much, and I'll open the floor to questions.
Hey, Manisha, thank you for that. That was amazing. And so I have so many questions because, around so many different things. So the first one, I think it would be really interesting. You mentioned having this research moments where you are understanding how your users are consuming the snack that you are creating. But as a designer, you get taught to observe that for objects, right? Mostly, right? So you observe how somebody is using a chair, how they're sitting down, how they're are they comfortable, are they not? And we train ourselves to do that very comfortably. But then when it comes to food, I think that's it requires a different type of attention, because when we're eating a chocolate bar, we're just opening it up and putting it in our mouth without really even understanding what's happening. And so what are the things that you actually observe from the users when you're doing this type of research? What is the thing that you're looking for so it becomes your work frame for designing the next snack that you're going to be designing?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, Daniela, and you're so right in that when we consume food, it's not as mindful act as, say, sitting down or using your phone, or even though that's sometimes not very mindful, but that it isn't considered as as mindful as we would like often. And as designers and anybody kind of within the R&D team, we are always observing kind of the way people interact with our products, and that can be in a consumer kind of research setting where we're observing how consumers react with a sample set that we put in front of them. It can be simple things such as, you know, how are they interacting with the packaging? You know, are they opening it in a certain way? Are they opening it in the way that it was meant to be opened? Because sometimes these things are considered and thought about. Sometimes things are meant to be opened in a certain way, and actually we find that consumers do the complete opposite. And that's great, because that's great knowledge in us for us to take away and say, well, actually we may need to think about this differently. It can be, you know, things like how are they actually eating something? Are they putting the whole thing in their mouth and just mindlessly devouring, or are they taking small bites? If they're taking small bites, does that mean that influences the shape in a particular way or the size of the piece that we need to design? Are they taking several bites and then stopping? Like, what are their behaviors that we need to be mindful of? And all these things are kind of cues that we would look for in terms of observing consumer behavior. But you're right, it's such a great question, and it, you know, and the start of the design thinking process, right, is to kind of build that empathy. We look to observe, and it is absolutely something that we do on a very regular basis across all consumers of all walks of life.
And what about the actual material of the snack that you're designing? Do you get to work a lot with the people that are designing that, or do you just get given that and then you need to kind of like think about how to work with that material? You know, like, let's say, like, is it going to dissolve quickly? Is it like chewy? Like these sort of things.
Yeah, so I can't answer too much in the specifics, but usually we operate in multidisciplinary teams. So there will be somebody from the design team, there will be somebody from the packaging team who's responsible for the outer layer, whatever that looks like. And then there will be our product developers, you know, who are responsible for the material, for the confection, how it tastes, how it eats, you know, the textures, the ingredients, how they formulate together. But there are many other people that from multiple kind of functions that formulate the project teams, and we would never work in silo. That, you know, every project that we are given, we have a marketing representative and we have R&D representatives, and within R&D we have various colleagues, subject matter experts, who would form together to kind of share their expertise and work on this together. And I think that's really important, because, you know, when we think about the ultimate experience that translates to consumers, you don't ever get that in a silo. You know, you don't ever get an unwrapped chocolate bar. You would always get a fully fledged packaged product, and that has always been mindfully thought about. So it's very important that we work together to kind of make sure that the end experience gets delivered to consumers in the right way.
Yeah. So lots of communication needs to happen between different types of you know, profiles.
Yeah.
Which means that, like, figuring out what that communication looks like, what are the mediums that you're using, becomes key, right? So I imagine now that you've started using VR, 3D, like starting to go, like, explore into that area. And we're having a lot of questions around, like, how do you actually use Gravity Sketch in your process? So without going into too much detail, but like, how do you envision these new technologies, especially like 3D spatial technologies, helping you out with this communication process between so many people that need to be involved in the process?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And firstly, you know, a bit of a disclaimer on our side, we're not, I wasn't able to show very specific examples just because of the nature of our industry. So apologies for that. But, you know, generally, using Gravity Sketch has really helped us when we are working through the ideation process. And I think that's the fundamental space in which we see us interacting with it as a tool. And that might be designing a chocolate bar, like the next Cadbury chocolate bar, the next Milka chocolate bar, and actually using it as a tool to help us to create those ideas. So the shapes of what the bar would look like, the individual pieces, how they fit together. And, one of the benefits of doing that kind of workflow in Gravity Sketch is that it means that we can get all of the designers in this virtual space together, and they can give live feedback and contribute and understand what we're trying to create in 3D better, because trying to articulate a sketch, irrespective of how proficient you are in sketching, is always going to be interpreted, every different way, but depending on who you're speaking to. So having that ability to kind of have everybody in the virtual space interacting with what you're crafting, going into the bar itself, like having the ability to kind of be fully immersed, that will really help to transform kind of how we effectively communicate. So helping us to be better communicators just within the design community, but also, beyond. I mean, it's within Mondelez, the tool is kind of being explored at the early stages. So kind of we're in our infancy and starting off our journey with Gravity Sketch, and we're still learning. But I think it's been phenomenal in helping us to kind of move to 3D quicker, and therefore we can explain our ideas to our marketing teams or to some of our other colleagues quicker and more proficiently, because we've been able to kind of articulate from 2D to 3D in a quicker process than what we would at the moment. So yeah, that's one of the benefits that we would see, and how we see it kind of taking shape going forward.
Did working in that way, kind of like just in 3D and also being immersed and being able to just even become a very small person and like seeing the chocolate massive, did that give you ideas that maybe before you didn't have?
That's an interesting question. I think I mean, personally, I've worked on a few examples, and I do think that having the freedom, or like the not having the conventional boundaries of trying to articulate in 2D what I'm thinking in my mind, that was really helpful. And then that unlocks more ideas. So just being in there and being able to just, creatively, sketch some stuff, have a play, free form. I think being in Gravity Sketch really fosters that notion of creating like free form, and that might lead to something cool, something that you can use. Whereas scribbling something on a piece of paper just doesn't have that. Obviously, you've got you're articulating your ideas, but it doesn't evolve as quick as it would when we're in Gravity Sketch and you're just doing this free flow, creative work. So I think that's really revolutionized the way that we would interact with it.
If you can walk us through the design process that you followed for a chocolate bar that is already in the market.
Sure. Okay. So I created, with the support of my team, a product called Dark Milk, which is on the market in the UK and in many countries kind of globally. So it was launched in Cadbury and Milka across many of our markets. So that is a particular example where we utilized kind of, this was a slightly older product, so before Gravity Sketch, but essentially the process that we would follow is that we would start by really understanding the kind of deep desire for our consumers. And back then, the issue or the problem that we were trying to solve is that consumers wanted, and when we talk about consumers, we're talking about slightly older consumers in this demographic, where they wanted a darker chocolate bar, so that they had the kind of cocoa-y notes of a dark chocolate, but they wanted the textural mouthfeel of a milk chocolate product. And that was kind of like the premise of this product and how we got to launching dark milk. So we did a lot of research into kind of the target consumer, what it is that they wanted, the occasion in which they would typically eat this chocolate, how they would eat it, who they're sharing it with, if they're sharing, because it's not always essential to share. And that really shaped, that kind of insight really shaped the way that product was crafted in terms of its shape. So, with extensive research, we looked at, how the size of the pieces needed to emulate a certain experience, how the number of the pieces in the bar needed to emulate a certain experience. That the product couldn't be too thick; it needed to be the kind of considered thickness in order to connote this kind of easy, melting experience in the mouth. So all of these things were really like important considerations that helped to shape the final 3D nature of that product, and it was really driven by the consumer insight need of wanting something that had the richness of a cocoa-y dark chocolate bar with the creaminess and textural experience of a milk chocolate, and that's kind of very high level, but those are the types of things that we would consider when we look at shaping our products.
Nice. Oh man, now I'm so glad I brought my chocolate bar. So I would love to, because I mean, this is such a weird thing that I'm about to say, but like for some reason, hearing chocolate, like that word in an English person, just makes me like want to eat chocolate for some reason. I had to say it. It's been a thing my whole life. So yeah, I would love to welcome Richard onto the stage. He's one of our guest speakers. He's going to be speaking at another session later on. Richard, welcome onto the stage.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to say a fantastic presentation, Manisha.
Thank you.
Yes, I think what was amazing is the level of detail that you went into, and I think being in one design profession, you forget that this happens in kind of all of them. So yeah, thank you for sharing so much.
No worries, you're welcome. And I think it is often difficult. I know in the chat, people are asking for very specific examples, so it was really difficult to kind of go into the level of detail that I wanted to achieve without going into the specifics. But yeah, glad that you found value, and I'm sure that we would operate in a similar kind of creative process.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of questions myself.
Yeah.
So it's very, very top line, but I think you did pick out a couple of things that I think might be the answer to this. But what do you find is the biggest advantage for this method of working?
Yeah, great question. I think for me personally, it really helps. Putting on a headset really helps to ground me in the present moment. Like the fact that there is no distraction. I can't be distracted because I've got this on my head that I need to be fully present and immersed, and it just means that the experience of designing and being creative, it just takes it to a whole different level for me in terms of being immersed in the process. And I do find that I can, and when I was using it more often in my previous team, it meant that I was just getting to ideas quicker, and as my capability was kind of building within the tool, it just helped to kind of get quicker and get better, and create iterations faster because you're fully immersed with no distraction.
Yeah, wonderful. And to kind of follow up on that question as well, how did kind of digital actually make its way into the company? Is this something that was brought in by the design teams, or was it an initiative by senior management?
Yeah, so this is actually So my move into the digital team meant that I moved out of R&D completely. So at the current design team within Mondelez sits within the R&D team, naturally so. And but the digital innovation team is actually a kind of a sub-function of our broader IT team. So essentially it's Mondelez Digital Services, which encompasses many different teams. And it was brought in by kind of our senior leadership, who were really kind of a few years ago now, who are really understanding the importance of kind of emerging tech and the role it's playing. Currently, my role is the kind of digital innovation role, is looking at how emerging tech helps us internally, so helps our colleagues to work smarter and better. There's some elements of doing some consumer work, but it's inherently looking at how we can support our business functions, so other functions such as R&D, work smarter and take them through their digital transformation journey.
Wonderful. And my final question is, do you go into 3D printing, after you've kind of explored in VR?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we kind of starting off on our journey with Gravity Sketch, but one of the pilots that we carried out, we did a lot of exploration in 3D in Gravity Sketch around a particular brief. And then we did move into 3D printing. So we created a 3D printed prototype from one of the concepts that we'd created within Gravity Sketch itself. So it's pretty amazing to see how you can progress, because we would normally use conventional CAD kind of packages to create 3D ready, like 3D printing readiness models. But to be able to do that and emulate that same workflow, again, as I mentioned, it's still a developing process, but 3D, it's inspirational, and I'm sure it will develop going further.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think speed is also a big part of that, actually getting through much more of the process in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Good.
Thank you, Richard.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, this has been super, super interesting. And I think everyone has so many questions in their heads. And I definitely have a lot of questions and would like to go super deep into understanding what does it actually take to design all these different snacks. But maybe it's a conversation for another day. Thank you so much, Manisha, for your presentation today, for joining us at the round this year.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.